The oil lamp's flame cast dancing shadows across the treaty papers spread before Elder Cedric, each document a death sentence dressed in formal language. Sarah stood at the edge of her grandfather's study, her fingers gripping the doorframe as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "Read it again," she whispered, though she'd memorized every damning word the first time. Cedric's weathered hands trembled as he lifted the parchment bearing the royal seal of Obsidian Vale Kingdom. His voice cracked on the opening line. "By decree of His Majesty, Draven Nightbane Alpha King of the Northern Territories, the Emberville Pack is hereby found in violation of the Treaty of Silverpine, having failed to provide tribute for 3 consecutive harvest seasons. We had nothing to give." Aurelia interrupted, her voice sharp with desperate anger. "The blight took our crops. The fever took half our hunters. What were we supposed to offer our bones? The law doesn't care about our suffering child." Cedric set the paper down, and Aurelia saw tears tracking through the deep lines of his face. "The penalty is dissolution. By the next full moon, Ember Vale ceases to exist. Our lands will be forfeit. Our people will be scattered to other packs as refugees if they're accepted at all. More likely they'll be, don't." Aurelia crossed the small room in 3 strides, kneeling beside her grandfather's chair. Through the thin walls of their modest pack house, she could hear the sounds of Ashwood Village settling into an uneasy night. 43 souls, all that remained of a pack that had once numbered in the hundreds. 43 people who depended on the Valmir bloodline for protection, for leadership, for hope. There has to be another way. There was. Cedric's gaze drifted to the second document, this one edged in black. Aurelia had refused to touch it. Lord Lucien Blackmore made that perfectly clear when he delivered the king's judgment. Aurelia's stomach churned at the memory of the royal emissary's visit 3 days ago. Lord Lucien had arrived with an escort of 20 armored soldiers, his smile cold as winter stone, as he'd outlined their options with practiced cruelty. "The Alpha King is a reasonable man," Lucien had said, his pale eyes traveling over Aurelia in a way that made her skin crawl. "He understands that Ember's diminished circumstances were not entirely within your control. He's prepared to offer a pardon, complete forgiveness of all debts, and a guarantee of Emberville's continued sovereignty." In exchange for what Cedric had asked, though Aurelia had already known. She'd felt the weight of Lucien's stare, had seen the calculation in his expression. "The Valmir bloodline carries old magic," Lucien had replied. "Saris is 19 unmated, and by all accounts quite intact. His Majesty requires a bride. If she agrees to wed him before the next full moon, your pack will be spared." The memory of her grandfather's anguished expression still haunted Aurelia. The way his face had crumpled, the way he'd looked at her with such devastating sorrow and said, "Absolutely not, we'll find another way." But there was no other way. They'd spent 3 days searching desperately for alternatives, and every path led to the same conclusion. Ember was dying, and Aurelia was their only hope. "Grandfather," she took his gnarled hands in hers, "tell me about him. The truth, not the stories." Cedric was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Draven Nightbane took the Obsidian throne 15 years ago, when he was barely 20. His father had been a tyrant, cruel, and mad with power. Draven killed him in single combat during the Blood Moon ceremony in front of every pack in the Northern Territories." Aurelia's breath caught. Patricide was the gravest taboo among their kind. He's ruled with absolute authority ever since. Cedric continued, "They call him the Winter King because his heart is said to be as cold as frost. They say he's never shown mercy to anyone who defies him. They say he broke off shaking his head. They say a lot of things, child. Some of them are probably even true." "Has he killed innocents?" Aurelia asked directly. "I don't know." Cedric's honesty was somehow worse than a lie. "I know he's ruthless. I know his enemies disappear. I know no one dares challenge his rule because the last 3 alphas who tried ended up with their heads mounted on the gates of Ravenhold Fortress." Aurelia stood moving to the window. Outside, she could see Elle in the village square, her 17-year-old sister laughing with a group of children. Elle still had hope. Elle still believed their grandfather would fix everything the way he always had. The courier leaves at dawn. Aurelia said quietly, "If I'm going to accept, it has to be tonight. Aurelia, please." "How long do we have?" she interrupted. "If I say yes." How long before the wedding Cedric's silence was answer enough? "Grandfather!" She turned to face him, and she saw him flinch at whatever he read in her expression. "How long?" "Sunrise," he whispered. "Lord Lucien said, if you agree the ceremony must take place at sunrise. The Alpha King is already en route to Silverpine Forest. You would meet him at the ancient altar at dawn." Aurelia's knees nearly buckled. "Tomorrow. They expect me to marry him tomorrow. It's a power play." Cedric stood crossing to her with the careful movements of age and sorrow. "They want you off balance, terrified, with no time to prepare or reconsider. Draven Nightbane doesn't make offers, Aurelia. He makes demands and crushes anyone who refuses." "Then I won't refuse." The words came out stronger than she felt. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." Aurelia cup-puffed her grandfather's face the way he'd done for her when she was small and frightened. "You've protected me my whole life. Let me protect you now. Let me protect all of them." "He'll break you," Cedric said, tears falling freely now. "That man destroys everything he touches." "Maybe," Aurelia tried to smile. "Or maybe I'll surprise him." She found Elle an hour later, sitting on the roof of their small cottage staring at the stars. Her sister took one look at Aurelia's face and knew, "You're gonna do it." Elle said not a question. "Yes, I'll come with you. I won't let you face him alone. You'll stay here." Aurelia climbed up to sit beside her sister, their shoulders touching the way they had since childhood. "You'll help Grandfather. You'll take care of our people, and you'll remember that whatever happens to me, it was my choice." Elle grabbed her hand fiercely. "You're the bravest person I know. I'm the most terrified person you know," Aurelia corrected. "I'm just good at hiding it." They sat in silence as the moon climbed higher, and Aurelia tried to memorize everything. The familiar sounds of the village, the scent of pine and woods, the warmth of her sister's hand in hers. By sunrise, all of this would be memory. "Tell me something," Elle said softly. "Do you think the stories are true about what he is?" Aurelia had heard. The whispers, the legends that traveled from pack to pack, that Draven Nightbane wasn't just an alpha, but something older, something that had walked the earth before humans learned to fear the dark. "I don't know," she admitted. "I guess I'll find out." The hours before dawn passed too quickly and too slowly at once. Aurelia bathed and dressed in the only formal gown she owned, a simple dress of deep green that had belonged to her mother. She braided her dark hair in the traditional style of an unmated female, weaving in sprigs of nightshade as was customary for a bride meeting her intended. Elder Cedric insisted on accompanying her along with 6 of their strongest remaining hunters as witnesses. They traveled in silence through the pre-dawn darkness. Following the ancient path to Silverpine Forest, the sacred grove appeared suddenly a clearing where moonlight pulled like liquid silver between towering pines. At its center stood the altar, a massive stone carved with symbols that predated written language. And standing before that altar, absolutely motionless, was a figure that made every instinct Aurelia possessed scream at her to run. Draven Nightbane was taller than any man she'd ever seen, his frame powerful in a way that suggested barely contained violence. He wore all black from his leather boots to the long coat that moved around him like living shadow. His hair was dark as midnight falling to his shoulders, and even from a distance Aurelia could see the sharp angles of his face, beautiful and cruel as a blade. But it was his stillness that truly frightened her. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge their approach. He simply stood there, like a statue carved from darkness itself, radiating a presence that made the air feel heavy and hard to breathe. "Sweet mercy," one of the hunters whispered. "That's him." Lord Lucien stepped from the shadows, his smile sharp. "His Majesty awaits his bride." Saris Velmare approached the altar. Aurelia's feet felt rooted to the ground. This was her last chance. She could run, could refuse, could condemn her pack and flee into the forest. For one wild moment, she actually considered it. Then Draven Thorneg's head turned and his gaze found hers across the clearing. They were silver, not gray or blue-gray, but true metallic silver that caught the moonlight and reflected it back like polished mirrors. They were the eyes of something that had never been entirely human, and they pinned her in place with the weight of an apex predator's stare. Aurelia couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only stare into those impossible eyes and feel her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Then he spoke, and his voice was deep and cold and absolutely certain. "Come here, little wolf. Let's get this over with." Aurelia's legs moved without conscious command, carrying her forward across ground that felt suddenly treacherous. Each step toward the altar was a step away from everything she'd ever known, and the man waiting for her looked like he'd never known warmth in his entire existence. Up close, Draven Thornridge was even more overwhelming. He towered over her by more than a foot, and this near, she could see the small scars that marked his hands, his throat, the sharp line of his jaw. Battle scars, she realized. This wasn't a king who ruled from a throne room. This was a warrior who'd carved his kingdom from the bones of his enemies. "You're younger than I expected." His metallic gaze traveled over her face with clinical assessment, as if she were a horse he was considering purchasing. "How old? 19? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Something flickered in his expression. "Too fast for her to read. Old enough to know what you're agreeing to, old enough to save my pack from extinction." The words came out sharper than she intended, but she was tired of being afraid, tired of being powerless. If she was going to bind herself to this man forever, she'd do it with her spine straight and her head high. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Behind him, Lord Lucien cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, if we could proceed with the ceremony, I'm speaking to my bride." Draven didn't look away from Aurelia, but the temperature in the clearing seemed to drop 10 degrees. Lucien went silent immediately. Draven studied her for another long moment, and Aurelia forced herself not to flinch under that penetrating stare. She'd heard that alphas could sense fear, that they fed on it like wolves on wounded prey. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "You're afraid?" he said finally, and Aurelia's stomach sank. "But you're standing here anyway." "Why?" "You know why." She lifted her chin. "Emberil falls if I refuse. Emberville is already fallen." His words were brutal in their honesty. "Your pack is hanging by a thread. One bad winter, one sickness, one raid, and they're gone regardless of what happens here today. So I'll ask again, why are you really standing here?" Aurelia's hands clenched into fists. "Because I won't let them fall alone, because they're my family, my responsibility." Because she stopped, surprised by the heat of tears behind her eyes. "Because I'm all they have left." Something in Draven's expression shifted just fractionally. He searched her face, and for a heartbeat she thought she saw something almost human flicker in the depths of his stare. "Then understand this," he said quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "Once we speak these vows, you belong to me, not as cattle, not as political leverage, but as my mate in the eyes of every pack, every kingdom, every power that matters. There's no annulment, no divorce, no escape. You'll be queen of Obsidian Vale, and that crown comes with blood on it." "I understand." Aurelia met his eyes without wavering. "No, you don't." His hand moved suddenly, catching her chin and tilting her face up to his. His touch was fever-hot against her skin, and Aurelia gasped at the sensation. "But you will." Before she could respond, he released her and turned to face the altar. "Begin the ceremony." Lord Lucien stepped forward, unfurling a scroll that glittered with official seals. "By the authority vested in me by the Council of Pacts and witnessed by the representatives of Emberville, I call upon the ancient laws to bind these two souls in sacred union." Aurelia barely heard the words. Her chin still burned where Draven had touched her, a heat that seemed to sink beneath her skin and spread through her blood. What was that Draven Nightbane Alpha King of Obsidian Vale? Do you claim this woman as your mate and queen? I do. No hesitation, no emotion. Just 2 words that sealed Aurelia's fate. Ceres Valmeri, last daughter of the Emberville bloodline. Do you accept this claim and bind yourself to his rule? This was it, the moment of no return. Aurelia opened her mouth, and somewhere behind her she heard her grandfather make a sound of pure anguish. I do. The words hung in the air for a heartbeat, and then Draven's hand shot out, catching her wrist. Before Aurelia could react, he'd drawn a small knife from his belt and drawn it across his palm, blood welling dark and red against his skin. Old blood seals old vows, he said, and slashed the blade across her palm as well. Aurelia hissed at the sudden pain, but Draven was already pressing their bleeding hands together, his fingers lacing through hers with surprising gentleness. The moment their blood mingled, something happened. Power surged between them like lightning, crackling up Aurelia's arm and exploding through her chest. She gasped, staggering, but Draven's grip was iron, holding her upright as magic. Ancient, wild, terrifying roared through her veins. What? She tried to speak, but the words died as images flooded her mind. Not images, memories, his memories, flashes of violence and blood. A throne room lit by guttering torches, a man's face twisted with rage and madness, the weight of a crown settling on dark hair, silver eyes staring out at an ocean of wolves, all of them bowing, submitting, accepting his dominance. And beneath it all, a loneliness so profound it was like staring into an abyss. Then it was over. Aurelia stumbled backward, and Draven caught her around the waist with his free hand steadying her. Their palms were still pressed together, blood drying between them, and she could feel his heartbeat through the contact, strong, steady, impossibly fast. "What was that?" she whispered. "The bond." His voice was rough, strained in a way it hadn't been before. "It's done. You're mine now." Lord Lucien was staring at them with barely concealed shock. The blood bond, he breathed. "I've never seen it manifest so strongly. Your Majesty, this is dismissed." Draven didn't look away from Aurelia. "All of you return to Ashwood and inform the pack that their sovereignty has been restored. The bride comes with me now." Elder Cedric stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Your Majesty, please let her say goodbye." She said her goodbyes. His gaze finally released Aurelia, turning to pin her grandfather in place. "Or did you think I wouldn't know, that I wouldn't smell her tears on the wind, hear her sister's heartbreak from miles away?" He looked back at Aurelia. "You're very brave, little wolf, or very foolish. I haven't decided which yet." Aurelia found her voice. "Let me embrace my family. 5 minutes. Surely you can spare that." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes, and for a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then, impossibly. His mouth curved in something that might have been a smile if it had contained any warmth. 5 minutes, he agreed. "Then we ride for Ravenhold Fortress. Don't make me come looking for you." He released her and stepped back, and Aurelia nearly fell without his support. Her legs felt weak, her head spinning from whatever had just happened between them. The bond, he'd called it. She could still feel it. A strange new awareness at the back of her mind, like a door that had been opened and couldn't be closed. Cedric caught her in his arms, and Aurelia let herself be small for just a moment, breathing in the familiar scent of pipe smoke and mountain pine that always clung to him. "If he hurts you," her grandfather began. "He won't." Aurelia surprised herself with the certainty in her voice. She pulled back, looking into Cedric's weathered face. "I saw something when our blood mixed. He's not what the stories say. Or maybe he is, but there's more to it. She struggled for words. "There's pain there. Old pain. Pain doesn't excuse cruelty." "No," Aurelia agreed, "but it explains it." Elowen pushed forward, throwing her arms around Aurelia's neck. "I'll write every day," her sister whispered fiercely. "And if you need me, if you need anything, I'll come. I don't care if he's a king or a monster or both. I'll come. I know you will." Aurelia held her sister tight, memorizing the feel of her embrace. "Take care of grandfather. Don't let him blame himself for this. I love you. I love you too." The 5 minutes passed far too quickly. When Draven's shadow fell over them, Aurelia knew her time was up. She turned to face him, and something in her chest twisted at the expression on his face. He looked almost uncomfortable, as if witnessing this display of affection was foreign to him. "It's time," he said simply. Aurelia nodded, not trusting her voice. She let Draven lead her away from her family, away from everything she'd ever known, toward the horses waiting at the edge of the clearing. His hand at the small of her back burned through the fabric of her dress, that same strange heat she'd felt before. He lifted her onto a massive black stallion with effortless strength, then mounted behind her. Aurelia stiffened as his arms came around her to grasp the reins, caging her against his chest. "Relax," he murmured, his breath stirring her hair. "I can feel your fear. It's distracting." "Then maybe you shouldn't have created a bond that lets you feel my emotions," Aurelia shot back. To her shock, she felt, rather than heard his laugh, a quiet rumble in his chest. "Maybe not," he agreed. "But it's done now. Hold on." The horse launched into motion, and Aurelia gasped, grabbing onto Draven's arm for balance. They raced through the forest at a speed that should have been impossible in the darkness. But the stallion moved with supernatural grace, never faltering, never slowing. Behind them, silver pine forest and everything Aurelia had ever known disappeared into shadow. Ahead, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn, painting the horizon in shades of blood and gold. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Home," Draven's voice rumbled against her back. "Ravenhold Fortress. You'll be safe there." "Safe from what?" His arms tightened fractionally around her. "From everything except me." They rode in silence as the sun rose, and Aurelia tried not to think about what awaited her in a fortress called Crimson, ruled by a king called Winter. Tried not to think about the strange heat that pulsed through her veins wherever their bodies touched. Tried not to think about the connection that now bound her to this dangerous, damaged man. Most of all, she tried not to think about the moment their blood had mixed, and she'd felt his loneliness like a physical blow, because something told her that loneliness was the key to understanding Draven Nightbane. And whether she wanted to or not, she was going to spend the rest of her life trying to unlock that mystery. As if sensing her thoughts, Draven shifted behind her, and his voice came low and dark in her ear. "Whatever you're thinking, little wolf, stop. You can't save me. You can't fix me. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for both of us." But Aurelia had spent her whole life healing things that others had given up on. And as the sun climbed higher and Ravenhold Fortress appeared on the horizon like a dark crown against the sky, she made a silent vow of her own. She would uncover the truth about the Winter King. She would survive this marriage, and somehow, some way, she would find out what had broken the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories. Even if it killed her, Ravenhold Fortress rose from the mountainside, like something carved from nightmare and ambition. Aurelia had heard descriptions of the fortress. Everyone had, but words couldn't capture the sheer scale of it. Black stone walls climbed impossible heights, studded with towers that seemed to pierce the clouds themselves. Banners bearing Draven's sigil, a wolf's head, circled by thorns, snapped in the mountain wind. But it was the gates that made Aurelia's blood run cold. Massive iron barriers wrought in the shape of bared fangs and mounted above them. "Don't look," Draven said quietly, but it was too late. 3 heads preserved by some dark art stared down with empty eyes. The alphas who challenged Draven's rule, their final moments of terror, frozen for eternity. A reminder, Draven said as the gates groaned open before them. "Mercy is weakness in this world. I learned that lesson young." Aurelia forced herself to look away from the gruesome display as they passed beneath it. The courtyard beyond was chaos. Soldiers training servants rushing between buildings, wolves in both human and animal form, moving with purpose. Every eye turned to them as Draven's horse clattered across the stones, and Aurelia felt the weight of hundreds of stares. "The Alpha King returns," someone shouted, and within seconds a crowd had gathered. Draven dismounted in one fluid motion, then reached up to lift Aurelia down. His hands spanned her waist easily, and that strange heat flared again where they touched. Their eyes met, and something flickered in his metallic gaze. recognition perhaps of the same sensation she felt. "My people." Draven's voice carried across the courtyard with supernatural clarity. "I present Cerys Thornridge, Queen of Obsidian Vale. Any who show her disrespect answer to me." The crowd fell to their knees as one heads bowed. Aurelia's heart hammered. Queen. She was a queen now, standing before hundreds of wolves who could tear her apart with their bare hands if their king commanded it. "Rise," Draven ordered. To Aurelia he said quietly, "Come. You need food and rest, and we need to talk." He led her through a maze of corridors, each more opulent than the last. Aurelia glimpsed training rooms filled with weapons libraries, with shelves stretching to cathedral ceilings, dining halls that could seat hundreds. This wasn't just a fortress. It was a city unto itself. Finally, they reached a set of carved double doors. Draven pushed them open to reveal chambers that took Aurelia's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the mountains, their peaks still crowned with snow despite the summer season. A massive bed dominated one wall, its black silk coverings embroidered with silver thread. Tapestries depicting wolves and moonlight covered the stone walls, and a fireplace large enough to stand in crackled with welcoming warmth. "Your rooms," Draven said, watching her reaction. "They connect to mine through that door." He gestured to a smaller entrance on the far wall. "You'll need attendants. I'll send Thalia. She's been with my household for decades and knows how things work here. And what exactly do you expect from me?" Aurelia turned to face him, exhaustion making her bold. "Am I supposed to smile and look pretty while you rule bare, you heirs? What's my purpose here besides being a political pawn?" Draven's jaw tightened. "You're my mate, my queen. That means it means nothing until you tell me what it means." Aurelia moved closer, craning her neck to meet his eyes. "You felt it too, didn't you? When our blood mixed that connection?" What was that? For the first time since she'd met him, Draven looked uncertain. He turned away, moving to the windows. The blood bond is ancient magic. It ties mates together, lets them sense each other's emotions, sometimes even share thoughts. It's meant to strengthen the connection between alphas and their chosen partners. And you didn't think to warn me before cutting my hand open. Would it have changed your answer?" He glanced back at her. "You were always going to say yes for your pack, your family. Don't pretend otherwise." He was right, and Aurelia hated him for it. "So now we're connected forever, and I have no say in it. You had a say." Draven's voice went cold. "You said I do. Everything else is consequence." Aurelia's temper, already frayed by fear and exhaustion, finally snapped. "Then tell me the consequences. Tell me what to expect from a husband who mounts heads on his gates and rules through terror. Tell me." Her voice broke despite her best efforts. "Tell me if I should be afraid of you." The silence that followed was absolute. Draven stared at her, and Aurelia watched emotions flicker across his face, too fast to name. Finally, he crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Yes," he said softly, "you should be afraid of me. I've killed men for looking at me wrong. I've destroyed packs for breathing defiance. I am exactly what the stories say, Cerys. A monster wearing a crown. Then why do I feel safe with you?" The words escaped before Aurelia could stop them. Draven went absolutely still. "What I can feel you." Aurelia pressed a hand to her chest where that strange awareness pulsed like a second heartbeat. "And you're not what you're pretending to be. You're angry and you're lonely and you're—" She broke off, shocked by her own boldness. "Careful, little wolf." Draven's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You're reading things that aren't there. Am I?" Aurelia held her ground even as every instinct screamed at her to retreat. "Then prove it. Show me the monster. Make me afraid." It was a challenge no alpha could ignore, and Aurelia knew it. His eyes flashed brightening to something almost luminous. His hand shot out, catching her throat. Not squeezing, just holding, his palm hot against her pulse point. "You want to see the monster?" His voice had gone rough, inhuman. "You want to know what I really am?" Aurelia's breath came quick and shallow, but she forced herself not to flinch. "Yes." His eyes blazed brighter, and Aurelia gasped as his pupils elongated, becoming distinctly wolfish. His teeth seemed sharper when he spoke. "I'm not just an Alpha Ceres. I'm something older, something that shouldn't exist. My father was a monster and his father before him, and the curse runs in our blood like poison." "What curse?" Aurelia whispered. "The kings of Obsidian Vale don't just rule wolves." His hand slid from her throat to cup her jaw, tilting her face up. "We are the wolves' ancient spirits, bound to human flesh by magic, so old its origins are forgotten. We're stronger than normal shifters, faster, more dangerous." And the bond his thumb brushed across her lower lip, and Aurelia's heart stuttered. "The blood bond with a true Obsidian Vale king is absolute. I can feel every emotion that crosses your mind. And you." He searched her face. "You'll feel me too. My rage, my hunger, everything." Aurelia's mind reeled. She'd married not just an alpha, but something from the old stories. The legends whispered about the first wolves that walked the earth. "The hunger," she said slowly. "What hunger?" His expression turned predatory. "For you." Before Aurelia could respond, he leaned down his nose, brushing along the column of her throat. She froze, heart hammering, as he inhaled deeply. The sound he made was barely human, a low growl that vibrated against her skin. "I can smell your fear," he murmured, lips brushing her pulse point. "But underneath it, there's something else, something sweeter. Draven." His name escaped as a breathless whisper. "Do you know what happens?" His mouth moved to her ear when the Obsidian Vale king claims his mate. It's not gentle. It's not civilized. The wolf takes what it wants, marks what belongs to it. And right now, his teeth grazed her earlobe, sending electricity down her spine. Right now, every instinct I have is screaming at me to mark you, to make sure every wolf in this citadel knows you're mine. Aurelia's hands came up to his chest. Whether to push him away or pull him closer, she wasn't sure. She could feel his heart racing beneath her palms as fast as her own. "Then why don't you—" The question hung between them, charged with something Aurelia didn't fully understand. Draven pulled back just enough to look at her, and the conflict in his eyes made her chest ache. Because he said roughly, "Once I start, I won't be able to stop. And you're already afraid enough." "I'm not afraid of you," Aurelia said, and realized it was true. Terrified of the situation. Yes. Overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Absolutely. But Draven himself, the man who held such iron control despite the supernatural hunger she could see burning in his eyes. That man didn't frighten her. You should be. But his hand was gentle as it slid into her hair, cradling the back of her head. "You should run from me, Ceres, while you still can. It's too late for that." Aurelia's fingers curled into his shirt. "We're bonded. You said so yourself. There's no running from this." Something in Draven's expression cracked, and before Aurelia could process what was happening, his mouth crashed down on hers. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined a first kiss should be. It was fierce and demanding and tasted of desperation, as if he were drowning and she were air. Aurelia gasped against his lips, and Draven took advantage, deepening the kiss until she was dizzy with it. His arms banded around her waist, pulling her flush against him, and Aurelia could feel the inhuman heat radiating from his body. That strange warmth she'd felt before exploded into an inferno racing through her veins and pooling low in her belly. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Draven rested his forehead against hers. "This is wrong," he muttered, though his hands were still clenched in the fabric of her dress. "You're 19, innocent." "I shouldn't. I'm your wife." Aurelia interrupted, her voice shaking. "And I'm not as innocent as you think. I know what happens between mates." Draven laughed, the sound bitter. "You know nothing, little wolf. Nothing about what I want to do to you. What the wolf wants." He cut himself off with a curse, stepping back and running his hands through his dark hair. "This is why I tried to stay away from you on the ride here. The bond makes everything harder. Makes me want things I have no right to want." Aurelia touched her lips, still tingling from his kiss. Her mind was a chaos of sensation and confusion, but beneath it all, their connection pulsed with awareness. She sensed Draven's desire, yes, but also his restraint, his genuine concern for her, his fear of becoming the monster he'd described. What if I want those things too? The words escaped before her courage failed. His eyes snapped to hers, blazing silver. Don't say that. Why not? Because it's inconvenient. Because you're trying to be noble. Aurelia moved closer, emboldened by something she couldn't name. I felt what you felt when our blood mixed. Draven, you're lonely. You've been alone in this citadel for 15 years, surrounded by wolves who fear you, ruling through strength because it's the only thing you trust. And now you have a mate, someone who's supposed to be your equal, and you're trying to push me away before we even begin. I'm trying to protect you. Draven grounded out. From me. Maybe I don't want to be protected. Aurelia reached up, cupping his face the way he'd done to hers. His skin was fever hot beneath her palms. Maybe I want to understand you instead. For a heartbeat, Draven leaned into her touch, his eyes drifting closed. He looked younger, like this, more vulnerable, and Aurelia felt her heart twist with an emotion she wasn't ready to name. Then his eyes opened and they were blazing gold. Not silver anymore, but molten gold that seemed to glow with inner fire. Draven. Aurelia's voice came out strangled. Your eyes run. The word was barely human, more growl than speech. Run now, Ceres, before I do something we'll both regret. But Aurelia was frozen, transfixed by the transformation happening before her. Draven's canines had lengthened into fangs, his nails darkening into claws. His body seemed to vibrate with barely contained power, as if something enormous was trying to break free from his skin. I can't. His voice broke. The wolf once. You smell like. He shook his head violently as if trying to clear it. Get out now. Aurelia stumbled backward, but before she could reach the door, Draven moved. One moment he was across the room, the next he had her pressed against the wall, his body caging hers. One hand braced beside her head, the other pressed flat against the stone, and Aurelia could hear the cracking of rock beneath his palm. I'm sorry, he whispered, and Aurelia wasn't sure if he was apologizing for what he'd done or what he was about to do. I'm so sorry. Then his mouth found the curve of her neck where it met her shoulder, and his fangs sank deep into her flesh. Aurelia screamed not from pain, though there was pain, sharp and bright and shocking, but the pain was immediately drowned by something else, a wave of sensation so intense it drove the breath from her lungs. Heat exploded through her veins, radiating out from the bite in pulsing waves that made her knees buckle. Draven held her up effortlessly, one arm wrapping around her waist as he drank. Aurelia could feel his satisfaction, his desperate need, the way her blood seemed to feed something wild and ancient in him. And beneath the fear and shock and overwhelming sensation, Aurelia felt something else, a sense of rightness, as if this was what their connection had been reaching toward all along, as if his mark on her skin was completing something fundamental between them. When Draven finally pulled back, his mouth was stained with her blood. His eyes were still gold, still wild, but there was horror in them now as they focused on her face. What did you do? Aurelia whispered, her hand flying to her neck. She could feel the wound, deep and clean, already beginning to heal with supernatural speed. I marked you. Draven's voice was raw, destroyed. The mating mark. I didn't mean to. I tried to fight it. He stepped back, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. I'm sorry. God, Ceres, I'm so sorry. But Aurelia wasn't listening because something was happening to her. Something impossible. The mark on her neck was burning, spreading heat through her entire body. And with that heat came power, wild primal power that made her gasp and stumble. What's happening to me? She looked down at her hands and saw them beginning to glow with a faint golden light. Shock registered across his features. That's not possible. What's not possible? Aurelia's voice rose in panic as the glow intensified. Draven, what did you do to me? The mark. He moved toward her, catching her as her legs gave out. It shares my power with you. That's what the mating mark does. But you're human. You shouldn't be able to. He broke off as Aurelia convulsed in his arms, her back arching as something enormous and terrible moved beneath her skin. She could feel it, a presence in her mind that hadn't been there before, ancient and wild and achingly familiar. "No?" Draven breathed, his arms tightening around her. "No, this can't be happening. Make it stop." Aurelia pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Draven, make it stop. I can't." His voice broke. "Ceres, I don't know how. This has never happened before. The mark shouldn't awaken anything in a human. You should just heal faster. Be stronger. Not." He cursed in a language she didn't recognize. Not this. Not what Aurelia gasped out between waves of pain and power. "What's happening to me?" Draven looked down at her, and in his golden eyes Aurelia saw wonder and terror in equal measure. "You're transforming," he whispered. "The mark is turning you into one of us, into a wolf." Aurelia's scream echoed through the citadel as her world shattered and reformed, and the last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Draven's face twisted with guilt and something that might have been grief. Then there was nothing but the fire in her veins and the howl of something ancient waking up inside her soul. Aurelia woke to silver moonlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sensation of silk sheets against her bare skin. For a moment she lay perfectly still, trying to remember where she was and why every nerve in her body felt like it had been struck by lightning. Then it all came flooding back. The mark! Draven's fangs in her throat, the terrible burning transformation that had torn through her like wildfire. She sat up abruptly and the world exploded into overwhelming sensation. She could hear everything. Guards walking 3 floors below whined, whistling through arrow slits in distant towers. The heartbeats of a dozen wolves somewhere in the citadel. She could smell everything, too. Stone and steel, blood and sweat, and underneath it all, a scent that made something in her chest purr with recognition. Pine and winter frost, and something wild. "Draven, you're awake." Aurelia's head whipped toward the voice, and she found him sitting in a chair by the fireplace, watching her with those impossible eyes. He looked haggarded, as if he hadn't slept in days, dark circles, shadowing his sharp features. "How long—" Her voice came out rough, and she was shocked by the sound of it richer, somehow carrying an undertone of something predatory. 3 days. Draven stood moving toward the bed with careful slowness, as if approaching a spooked animal. "Your body was fighting the change, I thought." He stopped, jaw clenching. "I thought I'd killed you." Aurelia looked down at herself, at hands that seemed the same but felt fundamentally different. She was wearing a silk nightgown she didn't remember putting on, and when she touched her neck, she found smooth skin where the bite should have been. Only a faint scar remained raised and sensitive. "What am I now?" she whispered. "A shifter." Draven stopped at the edge of the bed, hands clenched at his sides as if restraining himself from reaching for her. "The mark shared my power with you, but your body had latent wolf blood. It must have been dormant for generations in the Valmir line, waiting for a catalyst. My bite awakened it. Wolf blood." Aurelia's mind reeled. "That's impossible. The Valmir line is human. We've always been human. Somewhere in your ancestry there was a wolf." His gaze searched her face. "And now that blood has manifested, you're one of us. Ceres, a true shifter bonded to an ancient king. Do you understand what that means? That I can never go home." The words came out flat, emotionless, but Aurelia felt grief clawing at her throat. "My family won't recognize what I've become. You are home." Draven's voice was quiet but firm. "Obsidian Vale is your home now. These wolves are your pack, and I—" He stopped himself, jaw working. "I am responsible for what you've become." Aurelia looked at him, really looked at him, and she felt his guilt like a physical weight. "You didn't mean for this to happen. That doesn't change what I did." Draven turned away. "I marked you without permission, turned you into something you never asked to be. You should hate me." "I don't." The words surprised Aurelia as much as they seemed to surprise him. She slid off the bed, her new body moving with a grace she'd never possessed before. "I should, but I can feel you, Draven. Your guilt, your fear, and underneath it all." She moved closer. "Your loneliness." "Stop." His voice was strained. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I?" Aurelia reached out her hand, hovering over his shoulder. She didn't touch him, but she could feel the heat radiating from his body. You've been alone for 15 years, and now you finally have someone who can't run from you, someone who's bound to you by magic and blood, and you're terrified of destroying me the way your father destroyed your mother. Draven spun to face her, his eyes blazing. How do you... I saw your memories when our blood mixed. Your father, your mother, what his mark did to her. For a long moment, Draven just stared at her. Then his shoulders sagged, and he looked more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. Then you know why I'm terrified. My mother survived the mark for 3 years before it consumed her. She burned out from the inside, and I... His voice broke. I watched her die, screaming, and I was too young, too weak to help her. And now, I've done the same thing to you. I'm not your mother. Aurelia finally closed the distance between them, taking his hands and hers. Their connection flared to life, and she felt his surprise at how strong she felt. The mark awakened something in Male, something that was always there. I'm not burning out, I'm becoming what I was always meant to be. You don't know that, neither do you. She squeezed his hands, so instead of assuming the worst, why don't we see what happens together? Before Draven could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the door. His expression immediately shifted, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the mask of the Winter King. Enter, he commanded. A lean man with dark hair shot through with silver stepped into the room. His eyes widened slightly when they landed on Aurelia. Your Majesty and my queen, you're awake, Cassian. Draven's voice was hard. What's happened? Trouble at the eastern border. Someone sent soldiers across our territory. They're claiming it was an accident, but Cassian's gaze flickered to Aurelia again. They were specifically asking about the human bride, the one you just married. Ice flooded Aurelia's veins. Why would they want me? Because word is spread. Cassian's tone was grim. The Winter King has taken a mate, and there are those who see that as an opportunity to test your strength or exploit a potential weakness. How many soldiers? Draven's voice went deadly quiet. 50, maybe more. The patrol is holding them back, but they're outnumbered. Draven was already moving toward his weapons. Ready my guard, we ride within the hour. Draven, wait. Aurelia grabbed his arm. This is a trap. They want you to rush out, angry and reckless. He looked down at her, and something in his expression softened fractionally. They've invaded my territory and threatened my mate. I won't hide behind these walls. I'm not asking you to hide. Aurelia lifted her chin. I'm asking you to take me with you. Absolutely not. I'm not weak anymore. She pulled her hand back and felt power surge beneath her skin. Golden light flickered around her fingers, and both men stared. Whatever I'm becoming, it's more than just a wolf. The mark gave me something else. Something I can feel but don't understand yet. Which is exactly why you're staying here. Draven's voice was firm. You don't know how to control your power. You don't know how to fight. And I won't risk. You don't get to decide that. Aurelia's eyes blazed. I'm your queen, remember you're equal, not some fragile thing to be locked away for safekeeping. Cassian cleared his throat. She has a point, Draven. And if they're specifically asking about her, bringing her might give us an advantage they don't expect. Draven looked between them, clearly torn. She felt his wearing instincts, the need to protect her, battling with his recognition that she was right. Fine, he finally ground it out. But you stay close to me. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Aurelia smiled, feeling her new fangs press against her lip. Understood. They rode out within the hour, 20 wolves flanking them on all sides. Aurelia wore leather armor that Cassian had provided supple and light, dyed the deep crimson of Obsidian Vale's colors. Draven had armed her with a silver dagger, though they both knew her real weapon was the power therming beneath her skin. The eastern border was several hours' hard ride through mountain passes and dense forest. With every mile, Aurelia felt her new senses sharpening. She could smell the wolves around her, distinguish each individual scent. She could hear their whispered conversations, feel the nervous energy crackling through the group. But most of all, she could feel Draven. He rode beside her, his presence a constant warmth at the edge of her awareness, and his fear for her was palpable despite his controlled expression. Tell me what to expect, she said as they crested a ridge. A fight. Draven's voice was grim. Whoever sent these soldiers wants blood. They'll have poisoned weapons. Wolf's bane extract. One cut and most shifters are paralyzed within minutes. Most shifters. The ancient bloodlines are more resistant, but even I can be overwhelmed if they dose me enough. His hand moved to his sword hilt. That's why you need to stay back if it comes to combat, and if I can help. Draven looked at her, his silver eyes searching her face. Then help. But don't try to be a hero, Saris. I've ruled for 15 years without anyone to worry about. I don't know how to fight and protect someone at the same time. Then don't protect me. Aurelia met his gaze steadily. Trust me to protect myself. Before he could respond, one of the scouts ahead raised a hand in warning. They'd reached the border. The valley below was in chaos. Nighthaven wolves in their battle forms fought against soldiers in dark armor, and even from a distance, Aurelia could see the unnatural sheen on their weapons. Poison blades. There are more than 50, Cassian said grimly. Closer to 100, Draven's expression went cold. Then we even the odds. Cassian, take half our force and flank from the north. I'll hit them from the south. What about the queen? She's with me. Draven looked at Aurelia. Last chance to stay back. Not a chance. Aurelia drew her dagger, feeling power surge in response. Let's show them what happens when they threaten Obsidian Vale. The battle was brutal and chaotic. Aurelia found herself in the thick of it within moments, her body moving on pure instinct. She was faster than the soldiers, stronger than she had any right to be. Her dagger found gaps in armor with supernatural precision. But it was when the first soldier's poison blade grazed her arm that everything changed. Pain exploded through her limb, and Aurelia stumbled. The soldier grinned, raising his sword for a killing blow. Not so tough now, little queen. His words cut off as golden light erupted from Aurelia's wound. Not just light healing magic, pure and ancient, burning away the poison before it could spread. The soldier's expression morphed to terror as Aurelia straightened her wound, already closing. My turn, she said and struck. Around the battlefield, poisoned wolves began to glow with the same golden light. Aurelia didn't understand how, but somehow her healing magic was spreading, burning away poison wherever it touched. Wounded shifters rose. Renewed fighting with coordinated precision. Impossible, someone shouted. She's healing them. Draven appeared at her side, his fur matted with blood, but his eyes blazing with pride. He shifted back to human form just long enough to say, "You're magnificent." Then the enemy soldiers broke and ran, fleeing into the forest, leaving behind their wounded and weapons in their haste to escape. As silence fell over the valley, Aurelia collapsed to her knees, exhausted. She'd never used so much power at once. Every muscle trembled and her vision swam. Aurelia! Draven caught her before she hit the ground. You overdid it. You need to rest. Did we win? She whispered. We won. He pressed his forehead to hers. You won. Whatever that power is, it changes everything. Cassian appeared looking between them with a mix of shock and calculation. The queen can heal poison, the weapon that's been devastating our people for years. She can cure it. Draven's arms tightened around Aurelia, which means she just became the most valuable person in the Northern Territories and the most dangerous target. Aurelia wanted to respond, but exhaustion pulled at her consciousness. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was Draven's voice, rough with emotion. I've got you, little wolf. You're safe. I promise you're safe. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, Aurelia believed him. Aurelia woke in her chambers at Ravenhold Fortress, with sunlight streaming through the windows. For a moment she lay still, taking inventory. Her body ached, but the exhaustion from the battle was gone, and her arm where the poison blade had cut her, there wasn't even a scar. You heal faster now. Draven's voice came from the chair by the window, one of the benefits of being bonded to an ancient bloodline. Aurelia sat up, pulling the silk sheet around her. How long was I asleep? 2 days. He rose and moved to pour water from a pitcher. Your body needed time to recover from using so much magic at once. Thalia says, you're lucky you didn't burn yourself out completely. Thalia, an ancient healer who's been with my household for decades. She's been monitoring you throughout your recovery. Draven brought her the water, and Aurelia noticed the dark circles under his eyes. She also confirmed what Cassian suspected. Your healing magic isn't just normal pack healing. It's something older, something from the first wolves. Aurelia drank deeply, her throat parched. The first wolves. Before the pack split into different bloodlines, there were the originals, wolves who walked with gods and wielded magic as naturally as breathing. Draven sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to touch her. That power has been diluted over generations, but sometimes it resurfaces in descendants. Usually only in tiny amounts, but you. He shook his head. You have it in full measure. That's what the mark awakened in your ancient Valmir bloodline. So I'm what some kind of ancient wolf reborn. You're the most powerful healer in the Northern Territories. Draven's voice was grim, which means every enemy we have will want you dead or captured. The battle at the border was just the beginning. Before Aurelia could respond, rapid knocking sounded at the door. Cassian entered without waiting for permission, his face pale. We have a problem. A raven just arrived from Iron Spire. He hesitated from Lord Lucian Blackmore himself. Aurelia's blood ran cold at the name. What does he want? He's calling for a peace summit. Claims he wants to negotiate an end to hostilities between the human kingdoms and the wolf packs. Cassian's expression made it clear what he thought of that. He is specifically requesting both your Majesty's presence, the king, and the queen of Night Haven. It's a trap, Aurelia said immediately. Obviously, Draven agreed, but refusing would make us look weak, like we're afraid of the humans. Are we, Aurelia, challenged? After what we just did to their soldiers, we defeated 100 men. Cassian's voice was heavy. Intelligence suggests Lucien has access to thousands. And according to our spies, he's been working with someone powerful, someone who wants the wolf packs destroyed completely, who Draven demanded. We don't know yet. But whoever they are, they've been stockpiling Wolf's Bane for years, enough to poison every shifter in the Northern Territories. Cassian met Draven's eyes until the Queen demonstrated she can cure it. Now their entire strategy is useless, so they'll change strategies, Aurelia said slowly. Find another way to kill us, which is why this summit is dangerous. Draven stood pacing. They'll have had time to plan something new, something we won't see coming. Then we don't go. Aurelia rose as well, surprised by how steady her legs felt. We send an emissary. Show them we're not afraid, but we're not stupid either. That might work, Cassian said thoughtfully. If we know. Draven cut him off. They specifically requested the Queen. If we refuse, they'll know we're protecting her. They'll know she's our weakness. I'm not a weakness, Aurelia said quietly. You're the only thing in this world I can't afford to lose. Draven's voice was raw. That makes you a weakness, Saris? My weakness. The admission hung in the air between them. Aurelia felt the depth of his fear. Not for himself, but for her, and underneath it, something else. Something that might have been love if he'd let himself feel it. Then we need to make me a strength instead. Aurelia moved to the wardrobe, pulling out riding clothes. We go to this summit, but we go prepared. We show them that the king and queen of Obsidian Vale are not to be trifled with. You don't understand what you're suggesting. Draven said, if this is truly a trap, then we spring it and survive. Aurelia turned to face him, her eyes blazing with determination. You've spent 15 years ruling through fear, Draven. Always alone, always isolated. But you're not alone anymore. So stop trying to protect me from the throne I earned when I became your mate, and start treating me like the queen I am. Silence fell. Cassian looked between them clearly, trying not to smile. Draven stared at Aurelia, emotions wearing across his face. Finally, he inclined his head. As you wish, my queen. We'll attend the summit together. Good. Aurelia began dressing her movements efficient. When is it? 1 week hence, Cassian said at the ruins of Starfall. Neutral ground. Then we have 1 week to prepare. Aurelia fastened the last buckle on her leather vest and turned to face them both. Let's make sure whoever's behind this regrets ever challenging Obsidian Vale. The week passed in a blur of training and preparation. Thalia worked with Aurelia daily, helping her understand and control her healing magic. It wasn't just about curing poison. Aurelia could heal wounds, cure sickness, even ease pain with a touch. The power comes from your compassion, Thalia explained one afternoon as Aurelia successfully healed a wolf's broken leg. The first wolves were guardians as well as predators. They protected their packs not just with strength but with magic. You carry that legacy in your ancient bloodline. Aurelia flexed her glowing hands, marveling at the golden light. Can all wolves with ancient blood do this? Some can heal small wounds. A few can sense illness. Thalia's weathered face was serious. But what you can do curing wolf's bane, healing mortal wounds, spreading your power to others, that's unique. That's why you're so dangerous to our enemies. At night, Draven came to her chambers, not to her bed. He still kept that line carefully drawn, but to sit by the fire and talk. He told her about his childhood, about watching his father's madness grow, about the terrible choice he'd faced at 20 years old. I killed him in front of the entire court, Draven said one night, staring into the flames. My own father, and when his blood was still wet on my hands, I took his crown and dared anyone to challenge me. You saved your people, Aurelia said quietly. I became the monster everyone feared. He looked at her, his silver eyes full of old pain. That's why I never took a mate. Why I never let anyone close. Because the kings of Obsidian Vale don't love Ceres. We consume. We destroy. And I refuse to do to someone else what my father did to my mother. But you haven't destroyed me. Aurelia moved to sit beside him. I'm stronger now than I was before. The mark didn't break me. It completed me. You don't know that yet. But his hand found hers, their fingers lacing together. The mark's effects can take years to fully manifest. Then I guess we'll find out together. Aurelia leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling his warmth. You keep trying to push me away, Draven, but it's not working. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not going to break, and I'm certainly not going anywhere. She felt him sigh, his arm coming around her shoulders. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. Good thing you married me then. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers, and Aurelia thought that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. The night before they were to leave for Starfall, Aurelia couldn't sleep. She stood on her balcony, looking out at the mountains, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in her stomach. Second thoughts. Draven's voice came from the doorway. Third and fourth thoughts. Aurelia didn't turn around. This is insane, isn't it? Walking into an obvious trap, completely insane. Draven moved to stand beside her. Which is why I'm bringing 50 wolves instead of 20, and why Cassian is riding ahead with scouts to survey the ruins before we arrive. That won't be enough if they're serious about killing us. No. His hand covered hers on the balcony railing. But your power might be. If you can heal our wolves faster than they can poison them, we have a chance. Aurelia looked down at their joined hands. I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Draven turned her to face him. But don't let it control you. You've already proven you're stronger than anyone expected, including me. What if I'm not strong enough? Then we die together. His thumb brushed across her cheek. But I don't plan on dying tomorrow, Ceres. And neither should you. He leaned down and kissed her, and Aurelia rose on her toes to meet him halfway. It was different from their first kiss. Less desperate, more tender, a promise rather than a claiming. When they broke apart, Draven rested his forehead against hers. Come back to bed. You need rest. Will you stay? The words slipped out before Aurelia could stop them. Just to sleep. I don't want to be alone tonight. Something flickered in Draven's eyes. Are you sure I'm sure? They lay together in her massive bed, Aurelia tucked against Draven's side, his arm wrapped protectively around her. She could hear his heartbeat beneath her ear, steady and strong. Draven, she whispered, if tomorrow nothing will happen, but if it does. She lifted her head to look at him. I want you to know that I don't regret any of this. Not the marriage, not the mark, not becoming your mate. You gave me a purpose bigger than just surviving. You made me a queen. Draven's hand came up to cup her face, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. You were always a queen, Ceres. I just gave you a kingdom." He kissed her again deeper this time, and Aurelia felt heat building between them. But before it could go further, Draven pulled back with a wrathful smile. "Sleep. We have a long ride tomorrow." Aurelia settled back against his chest, feeling safer than she had in weeks. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together, and that was enough. The ruins of Starfall rose from the landscape like broken teeth, ancient stones that jutted from a barren plateau. Aurelia had expected something grand, but this was just empty, desolate. The perfect place for an ambush. "I don't like this." Cassian muttered, his hand on his sword hilt. The scouts reported minimal activity. Too minimal, which means they're hiding. Draven's eyes scanned the horizon. "Aurelia, stay close. If anything happens, I know we've been over this." Aurelia touched the dagger at her belt, feeling her power humming beneath her skin, ready to be called forth. They'd brought 100 wolves this time, a significant force, but still nowhere near enough if Lucienne had brought an army. The wolves fanned out as they approached the ruins, moving with practiced coordination. As they passed between two standing stones that marked the entrance to the ancient site, Aurelia felt something wrong. A prickling at the base of her skull, a sense of being watched. "Draven," she began. Then the world exploded. Soldiers poured from behind every stone from trenches, dug into the plateau from concealed positions all around them. Not 100, not even 1,000 thousands. Aurelia's heart stopped as she realized the scope of the trap. They were completely surrounded. Draven roared, already shifting into his massive wolf form. Around them, his wolves did the same, forming a protective circle around Aurelia. But it was futile. For every enemy they cut down, 2 more appeared. And worse, these soldiers weren't using Wolf's Bane. They had something new. Aurelia watched in horror as one of Draven's wolves fell not from poison, but from a strange paralysis that spread from where a projectile had struck him. "What is that?" she shouted to Cassian. "I don't know. He was bleeding from a dozen cuts, fighting desperately. Some kind of dart. More wolves fell. The paralysis was instant and total. They weren't dead, but they couldn't move, couldn't fight. And without them, Aurelia's protective circle was shrinking fast. She felt Draven's rage and desperation. He was cutting through enemies with brutal efficiency, but there were too many. They were going to be overwhelmed. Aurelia. Draven's mental voice crashed into her consciousness. "You have to run now. I won't leave you. You have to." His physical form was bleeding from a dozen wounds, his movement slowing. "One of us has to survive to warn." He never finished. 3 darts struck him simultaneously, and Obsidian Vale's Winter King collapsed mid-lunge, his massive form hitting the ground hard. Draven. Aurelia's scream tore from her throat. A figure emerged from the ranks of soldiers, clapping slowly. Lord Lucien Blackmore, his smile cruel and satisfied. "Magnificent," he said. "The mighty Winter King brought low by simple chemistry. Did you really think I'd make the same mistake twice? Girl Wolf's bane can be cured by your little gift?" But this, he held up one of the darts. "This is pure paralytic. No magic can touch it. No healing can cure it." Aurelia's mind raced. She could sense Draven. He was alive, conscious, but completely immobilized. Around her, the last of the standing wolves fell. "It's over," Lucien continued, walking closer. "The Winter King is finished. The wolf packs will be scattered. And you," his eyes gleamed with malicious intent, "you're going to watch him die knowing you failed to save him. No." Aurelia's voice was quiet, but something in her tone made Lucien stop. "No," he laughed. "Girl, you're surrounded by 5,000 soldiers. Your wolves are down. Your king is paralyzed. What exactly do you think you can do?" Aurelia looked at Draven's fallen form, felt his fury and fear, looked at the wolves who'd fought to protect her, now helpless on the ground, looked at Lucien, so certain of his victory, and she made a choice. This she said and reached for the power inside her. Not just her healing magic, not just the wolf strength the mark had given her. She reached for their connection itself, for that bond to Draven that ran deeper than blood or magic. And she pulled. Power exploded from her like a shockwave. Golden light so bright that soldiers screamed and covered their eyes. Aurelia felt it racing through her, into Draven, into every fallen wolf connected to their pack. But she didn't just heal them. She gave them her strength, her power, her absolute refusal to let them fall. Draven's eyes snapped open, blazing with borrowed magic. The paralysis that should have kept him down for hours burned away in seconds as Aurelia's power flooded him. Around them, every fallen wolf began to glow with the same golden light, the paralytic dissolving from their systems like ice in sunlight. Impossible. Lucien stumbled backward, his confidence crumbling. You can't. Draven rose, his massive wolf form now wreathed in golden flame. What did you do? His mental voice was full of wonder. I shared everything. Aurelia gasped, feeling the strain of maintaining the connection to so many wolves at once. I don't know how long I can hold it. Then we'd better make it count. What happened next would be spoken of in legends for generations. The wolves of Obsidian Vale, empowered by their queen's ancient magic, tore through Lucien's forces like a wildfire through dead wood. Every wound healed almost as fast as it was inflicted. Every fallen wolf rose renewed. They were unstoppable. Lucien's soldiers broke and ran, fleeing in terror from an enemy they couldn't kill. Most scattered into the wilderness, but Obsidian Vale wolves were faster. Within minutes, the plateau was littered with the dead and wounded, and Lord Lucien himself was backing away, looking for an escape. But he found himself surrounded, cut off from retreat by wolves who'd encircled him. Going somewhere, Aurelia's voice carried across the battlefield, amplified by her power. Lucien spun to face her, reaching for a weapon, but Draven was there in an instant. He shifted back to human form, one hand at Lucien's throat, lifting the man off his feet. You made a grave mistake, Draven said quietly. You threatened my mate, my queen, and now you're going to tell me everything. Who planned this? Who's been stockpiling poison and weapons? Who wants the wolf packs destroyed? Go to hell, Lucien spat. Draven's grip tightened and Lucien began to choke. Wrong answer. Draven, wait. Aurelia approached her power, still blazing around her. She could feel it draining her, burning through her reserves, but she held on. Let me try something. She placed her glowing hand on Lucien's forehead, and suddenly she was inside his mind. Not just surface thoughts, deeper memories, plans, conspiracies. She saw it all. The mysterious benefactor who'd approached Lucien years ago, the promises of power and wealth, the systematic campaign to turn the human kingdoms against the wolves, and at the center of it all, a name, Prince Valor of Iron Spire, the king's eldest son, next in line for the throne. Aurelia pulled back, gasping. It's Prince Valor. He's been planning this for years. He wants to unite the human kingdoms under his rule by making the wolves a common enemy. The Prince Cassian had appeared bloodied, but alive. But why? Because his father made peace with us, Draven said grimly. And Valor sees that as weakness. He wants to prove he's stronger than his father by doing what the old king never could, wiping out the wolf packs completely. There's more, Aurelia said, her voice shaking. He knows about me, about what I can do. He's already planning his next move. An army 30,000 strong marching within the month. She never finished. The strain of holding so much power, of healing and strengthening 100 wolves simultaneously finally became too much. The golden light flickered and died, and Aurelia collapsed. Draven dropped Lucien, instantly catching Aurelia before she hit the ground. Ceres, stay with me. I'm okay, she whispered, but her vision was swimming. Just used too much. You used everything. Draven's voice was rough with emotion. You gave us all your strength. You saved us all. He looked up at Cassian. Secure Lucian. We're taking him back to Ravenhold Fortress for questioning. Get our wounded ready to move. We leave immediately. What about the Prince? Cassian asked. Draven's expression went cold and deadly. Let him come. After what he tried to do today, after what he planned to do to my mate, I'm going to enjoy destroying him. The journey back to Ravenhold Fortress took 3 days with their wounded. Lucien was bound and guarded, though he remained defiant. Aurelia drifted in and out of consciousness, her body struggling to recover from the massive power drain. When she finally woke fully on the third day, she was back in her chambers. Draven sat beside her bed, holding her hand, his expression haggard. "You scared me," he said quietly when he saw her eyes open. "You've been unconscious for days. What happened?" Aurelia tried to sit up, but her body felt like lead. "Did Lucienne is being interrogated as we speak?" Draven helped her sit, propping pillows behind her. "He's told us everything he knows about Valor's plans. The human prince has been building this conspiracy for years, using Lucienne as his puppet. And now Lucian will stand trial before the Council of Pax." Draven's jaw tightened. "He won't survive it. What he did attacking under a peace banner using forbidden weapons. Those are capital crimes. He chose his fate when he chose to serve Valor." Aurelia processed this. Part of her wanted to feel sympathy for Lucienne, but she remembered the glee in his eyes as he'd watched Draven fall. "And Prince Valor has declared war." Draven's voice was flat. "Official proclamation arrived yesterday. He's calling the wolf packs a threat to human civilization and demanding that all kingdoms join him in wiping us out. How many are listening?" "Too many." Draven looked exhausted. "The smaller kingdoms are afraid. They're joining Valor's coalition. Within weeks, we'll be facing the combined armies of 5 human kingdoms, maybe more. How many soldiers is that? 30,000, possibly more." He squeezed her hand against our 3,000 wolves across all the northern territories. Aurelia's blood ran cold. "Those odds are impossible." "I know." Draven's voice was heavy. "I've been calling every pack leader, every alpha I can reach. Some are willing to fight. Others want to flee north, abandon our lands entirely. And some," he stopped shaking his head, "someone want to surrender you. They think if we give Valor the healer queen, he'll leave the rest of us alone. Would he know? But desperate people believe desperate lies." Draven's silver eyes met hers. "I won't give you up, Saris. No matter what any alpha demands, you're my mate, my queen, and I'd burn the world before I let anyone take you from me." The fierce possessiveness in his voice sent heat through Aurelia's chest. "So what do? We fight. We gather every wolf who's willing. We prepare for the biggest war our kind has seen in centuries." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "And we hope that whatever power you showed at Starfall can be used again, because without it, we don't stand a chance." Before Aurelia could respond, the door burst open. A young wolf, breathless and wide-eyed, stumbled in. "Your Majesty, my queen, you need to come quickly. He gulped air. "There's something happening in the courtyard. Wolves from across the territories, hundreds of them. And they're all asking for the queen." Draven was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to his sword. "Is it a challenge, an uprising? No, sire. They want to pledge loyalty to her." Aurelia and Draven exchanged glances. "Help me up," she said. "You're too weak. Help me up, Draven. If wolves are coming to pledge loyalty, I need to be there to accept it." He helped her into a robe, and together they made their way to the main courtyard. What they found took Aurelia's breath away. Hundreds of wolves filled the space, more arriving every minute, all of them kneeling with their heads bowed, the gesture of absolute submission and loyalty. "What's happening?" Aurelia whispered. An elderly alpha rose from the crowd, his weathered face solemn. "Word has spread, Your Majesty, of what you did at Starfall, how you saved 100 wolves from certain death, how your power healed wounds and burned away paralysis." He knelt again. "We come to offer ourselves to your service, to fight for Obsidian Vale, to protect the queen who would give everything to save her pack." More voices joined his. "For the Golden Queen," someone shouted. "For the healer of Obsidian Vale." The chant spread through the crowd, growing louder with each repetition. Aurelia felt tears prick her eyes as she realized what was happening. These wolves weren't just pledging loyalty to Obsidian Vale or to Draven. They were pledging loyalty to her. "I don't know what to say," she admitted quietly. "Then show them." Draven's hand found the small of her back supporting her. "Show them the queen who saved them all." Aurelia took a deep breath and let her power rise just a flicker. She was still too weak for more, but enough that golden light haloed her body. The crowd gasped and the chanting grew even louder. "I accept your pledge." Aurelia's voice rang out across the courtyard. "And I make you a promise in return. Prince Valor wants to destroy us. He thinks we're animals to be hunted and killed, but we will show him what we really are. We are pack. We are family, and we will not go quietly into extinction." The wolves howled their approval, the sound shaking the very stones of Ravenhold Fortress. As the crowd dispersed to prepare for war, Draven pulled Aurelia close. "You've done it," he murmured against her hair. "You've united the packs in a way I never could. They don't just fear me anymore. They believe in you." "I don't want them to believe in me," Aurelia said. "I want them to believe in us and what we can build together." Together, Draven agreed, pulling her closer. Always together. Later that night, back in their chambers, Aurelia asked the question that had been weighing on her. The trial. When will it happen tomorrow? Draven's voice was grim. The council demands justice, and they'll have it. Lucian will face every alpha he betrayed. And then he dies. Draven's arms tightened around her. "I know you have a kind heart, Ceres, but there can be no mercy for what he did. He has to serve as an example. Betraying the packs has consequences." Aurelia nodded, understanding, even if part of her wished for another way. "And after, when Valor's army comes, we make our stand." Draven's hand came up to cup her face. "But before that happens, there's something I need to say. Something I should have said weeks ago." Aurelia looked up at him, her heart suddenly racing. "What I love you." The words came out raw, vulnerable. "I've been trying not to, trying to keep that distance because I was afraid of what it would mean. But watching you nearly die twice now, I realize I can't hold back anymore. I love you, Ceres Thornridge, more than I've ever loved anything or anyone." Aurelia felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I love you too, even though you're stubborn and overprotective, and sometimes infuriatingly noble." He kissed her, cutting off her words, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. This was a claiming and a promise and a vow all wrapped into one. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Aurelia rested her forehead against his. "We're going to survive this together." "Together," Draven agreed. "Now and always." They spent the rest of the night in each other's arms, knowing that war was coming, but choosing to focus on what they'd found in each other. And when dawn came, bringing Lucien's trial and the preparations for the coming conflict, they would face it side by side. The Winter King and the Golden Queen, united, unbroken, unstoppable. The weeks following Lucien's execution, swift and witnessed by every alpha in the territories, transformed Ravenhold Fortress into a fortress, preparing for the war of their lifetime. Aurelia stood on the battlements one morning watching new arrivals stream through the gates. Every day brought more wolves seeking to join the fight, drawn by tales of the Golden Queen who could heal the unhealable. "They're getting faster," Cassian commented, appearing at her side. "Another few days and they'll be ready for actual combat. Will days be enough?" Aurelia watched a particularly young wolf struggle with his transformation practice. Valor's army could be here within the month. Our scouts report they're still gathering forces in Iron Spire. We have some time. Cassian hesitated. "My queen, there's something you should know. More alphas have arrived. They're asking for an audience." "Let me guess. They want to challenge Draven's authority." "No, they want to bond with you." Aurelia's head snapped around. "What not mating bonds?" Cassian clarified quickly. "They're asking for marks. Lesser marks like the connection you share with Draven, but weaker. They've heard that your power can spread, and they want to be able to channel your healing in battle." Aurelia's mind raced. At Starfall, she'd spread her power through existing pack bonds and her connection to Draven, but creating new marks, new channels for her magic. Is that even possible? Thalia thinks so. She's been researching the old texts. Cassian's expression was careful, but it would mean marking multiple wolves, creating bonds with them, and Draven would hate it. Aurelia finished. She could imagine his reaction. The possessive alpha who barely tolerated others being near her, now watching as she created magical connections with other wolves. But strategically, it would change the entire war, Cassian said bluntly. If you could mark even 10 wolves, and they could channel your healing to others in battle, we'd have mobile healing centers across the battlefield. Valor's weapons would be useless. Aurelia looked back at the training grounds, at the young wolves who would be fighting for their lives. How many are asking 50 volunteers, all willing to accept whatever consequences come from bonding with a queen whose power is still not fully understood? I need to talk to Draven. She found him in the war room, bent over maps with several pack leaders. They were arguing tactics, voices rising as they debated the best way to defend against a force 10 times their size. "We can't hold the valley," one alpha insisted. "We need to fall back to the mountain passes where numbers matter less." "And abandon half our territory," another countered. "That's admitting defeat before the battle even starts." "Gentlemen," Aurelia's voice cut through the argument, "I need a moment with my husband." The alphas bowed and filed out, leaving Aurelia alone with Draven. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes from too many sleepless nights spent planning. "Let me guess," he said wearily. "Cassian told you about the marking requests." "You already knew." "Of course I knew. Every wolf in this citadel knows." Draven turned back to his maps, and the answer is no. "You haven't even heard my thoughts on it. I don't need to." His voice was hard. "Marking creates bonds, intimate connections. Every wolf you mark will feel echoes of what we share. Some are young males, Ceres. Do you understand what it will do to them? Feeling even a fraction of the bond between mates, I understand it will save lives." Aurelia moved closer. "Draven, we're about to face 30,000 soldiers with weapons designed to kill us without some kind of advantage, without you burning yourself out trying to heal an entire army." Draven's control snapped, his voice rising. "Do you know what it does to me? Feeling you pour out your power until there's nothing left. Watching you collapse because you gave everything to save others. If you create multiple bonds and try to channel healing through all of them simultaneously, I could die." Aurelia finished quietly. "I know," Thalia warned me. The admission seemed to take the wind out of Draven's anger. He slumped against the table, suddenly looking every one of his 35 years. "Then you understand why I can't allow it. It's not your choice to allow or forbid." Aurelia kept her voice gentle but firm. "I'm your mate, Draven. Your equal, not your subject. You're the only thing in this world I can't lose." His voice broke. "Please, Ceres, don't ask me to watch you kill yourself, saving wolves who might abandon you the moment the tide turns. They won't abandon me." Aurelia took his hands, pulling him to face her. "They believe in what we're building here, a kingdom where wolves don't live in fear, where power is used to protect, not destroy. That's worth fighting for, worth dying for if it comes to that. Not to me." Draven's forehead pressed against hers. "Not if it costs me you." Aurelia felt her heart break a little at the raw emotion in his voice. "Then help me find another way, a way to channel my power without burning out. Because I'm going to do this, Draven, with or without your blessing. Those wolves are volunteering, knowing the risks. I won't let their courage go to waste." For a long moment, Draven was silent. Then he sighed, defeated. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. You've said that before. It bears repeating." He pulled back to look at her. "If we're doing this, we're doing it carefully. You mark 5 wolves, not 50. We test the bonds, see how much power you can channel without hurting yourself. And if at any point Thalia says you're approaching your limits, you stop immediately. Non-negotiable. It wasn't everything Aurelia wanted, but it was a start. Deal. And one more condition." Draven's eyes blaze with possessive fire. "The mark you give them is nothing like mine. They get a lesser bond, a tool for channeling magic, not an emotional connection. You are mine, Ceres. Heart, soul, and body. That doesn't change. That will never change," Aurelia assured him. She pulled him down for a kiss, pouring everything she felt into it. Her love, her gratitude, her absolute certainty that they would survive this together. When they broke apart, Draven rested his forehead against hers. "If you die because of this, I'm going to be very angry with you," noted. Aurelia smiled. "Now let's go tell Cassian to choose 5 volunteers." "And Draven, thank you for trusting me always," he murmured, "even when it terrifies me." The marking ceremony took place 2 days later in the Great Hall. Aurelia had spent those days with Talia learning the precise technique for creating lesser bonds marks that would allow magic to flow but wouldn't create the deep emotional connection she shared with Draven. 5 wolves knelt before her, 3 males and 2 females, all young and strong, all volunteers from different packs. They'd been chosen not just for their fighting ability, but for their capacity to lead. Each would command a unit in the coming battle, spreading Aurelia's healing wherever it was most needed. "This will hurt," Aurelia warned them. "The mark burns as it settles, and once it's done, you'll be connected to me. You'll feel my presence at the edges of your consciousness. If that becomes too much, it won't." The eldest of them, a female alpha named Cassia, said firmly, "We understand the risks, my queen, and we accept them gladly." Aurelia looked to Draven, who stood at the edge of the hall with his arms crossed, his expression carefully neutral. She felt his tension, his barely controlled jealousy at what she was about to do. "I love you," she sent to him silently. "Only you. Always you." His expression softened fractionally. "I know. Doesn't make this easier." Aurelia turned back to the volunteers. "Then we begin." She placed her hand on the first wolf's shoulder, a young male named Gareth, and let her power rise. Not the full force of her magic, just a careful thread of it. Reaching out to create a connection, she found the place where pack bonds naturally formed and gently woo her power into it. Gareth gasped as golden light spread from her palm across his skin, sinking beneath the surface. When it faded, a small mark remained on his shoulder. A stylized wolf's head breathed in light much simpler than the intricate mark Draven had given her. "How do you feel?" Aurelia asked. "Strange." Gareth flexed his marked shoulder. "I can feel warmth like sunlight just beneath my skin. And I can sense you, my queen. Not your thoughts, but your presence. Like knowing someone's in the room, even with your eyes closed." "Good, that's how it should work." Aurelia moved to the next volunteer. One by one, she marked them all. By the time she finished with the 5th, Aurelia was trembling with exhaustion but still standing. Talia nodded approvingly from her position nearby. The old healer had been monitoring Aurelia's vital signs throughout, ready to intervene if the marking became dangerous. "Now for the test," Aurelia said. She drew a small knife and before anyone could stop her, cut a shallow line across her palm. "What are you doing?" Draven was at her side, instantly reaching for her hand, testing the bond. Aurelia held up her bleeding palm. "Watch." She closed her eyes and pushed healing magic into the 5 new bonds. The marked wolves gasped in unison as power flooded through them, and Aurelia felt the magic flow out, then looped back to her, carrying the healing with it. When she opened her eyes, her palm was whole again, and none of the marked wolves had collapsed or shown signs of strain. "Incredible," Thalia breathed. "You didn't just channel magic through them. You created a circuit. Your power flows out, heals the target, and returns to you. That means I can heal without draining myself." Aurelia finished staring at her unmarked palm in wonder. "As long as I'm channeling, I'm not using up my own reserves. They're acting as conduits and amplifiers." "Which changes everything," Cassian said, a fierce smile spreading across his face. "My queen, you've just ensured we survive this war." But Draven was frowning. "There has to be a catch. Magic always has limits. There is Talia confirmed. The marked wolves will bear the strain instead of the queen. If she channels too much power through them for too long, they'll burn out." Draven finished grimly. He looked at the 5 marked wolves. "You understand what you've agreed to. You're not just conduits. You're shields protecting your queen by taking the damage she would have suffered." "We understand," Cassia said, "and we accept it willingly. Better 5 wolves risk burnout than lose our queen and everyone she could save." Aurelia felt tears prick her eyes at their courage. "I won't let it come to that. I'll monitor the bonds constantly. If any of you start to strain, then we push through anyway." Gareth interrupted with a grin. "That's what soldiers do, my queen." Word of the marking spread through the citadel within hours. By evening, another 100 wolves were requesting to be marked as well. Kel refused additional marks for now, wanting to see how the first 5 performed in training exercises. But Aurelia could see the hope in the wolves' eyes. They finally had a real chance against Valor's army. That night, exhausted from the day's events, Aurelia returned to her chambers to find Draven already there, staring into the fire. "You handled that well," she said softly. "I know it wasn't easy for you. You marked other wolves with power drawn from our bond," Draven said flatly. "Every one of those marks is created from what we share. Part of me is now in them, and part of them is in you." He turned to look at her, his eyes blazing. "So no, it wasn't easy. It went against every instinct I have, but you let me do it anyway." Aurelia moved closer. "Because you trust me. Because I love you more than I hate sharing you." Draven pulled her against him, his arms banding around her waist. "But make no mistake, Saris. You are mine. Those wolves have a sliver of our bond, a tool for magic. You belong to me completely. Show me," Aurelia whispered, rising on her toes to meet his lips. The kiss was fierce and possessive, Draven claiming her mouth like he was proving a point. Aurelia responded with equal passion, her hands fisting in his shirt as she pulled him closer. "I need you," Draven growled against her throat. "Need to remind myself that you're mine, that no mark, no bond, no magic will ever change that." "Then take me," Aurelia breathed. "I'm yours, Draven. Only yours." They came together with desperate intensity, all pretense of restraint finally shattered, and as their bodies joined, Aurelia felt their connection explode into brilliant life, linking them on every level: physical, magical, spiritual. This was what they were meant to be, not just king and queen, but true mates, 2 halves of a whole, bound by magic older than memory. Later, as they lay tangled together in the aftermath, Draven pressed a kiss to the mark on her neck. His mark, the one that had started everything. "I don't know how this war is going to end," he said quietly, "but I know that whatever happens, I found you, and that makes everything else worth it." Aurelia turned in his arms to face him. "We're going to win. We have to. There's too much at stake. When Valor's army arrives, we'll face them together." Aurelia pressed a finger to his lips. "No more talk of war tonight. Tonight we're just Draven and Saris, just 2 people who love each other. The war can wait until morning." Draven captured her hand, kissing her fingers one by one as my queen commands. They made love again, slower this time, savoring every touch and kiss. And later, Aurelia felt Draven's love wrapping around her like a shield, promising that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. Always together. The ravens arrived at dawn 3 days later. Aurelia woke to frantic pounding on the door and Draven already moving, pulling on clothes with practiced efficiency. Cassian burst in without waiting for permission, his face ashen. "They're here! Valor's army! They're marching through the southern pass. They'll reach the valley by nightfall." Aurelia's blood turned to ice. "We're out of time. We're out of time," Draven agreed grimly. He turned to Cassian. "Sound the alarm. Get every wolf to battle stations. Send runners to the outer territories. Anyone who hasn't arrived yet needs to know this is it." His silver eyes found Saris. "And get the Queen's Guard ready." "I'm not hiding," Aurelia said immediately, already dressing and pulling on her armor. Saris, "I'm not hiding." She fixed him with a look that becaked no argument. "I'm the reason half these wolves are here. I'm the reason we have any chance at all. If I stay behind walls while they fight, what message does that send?" Draven looked like he wanted to argue, but Cassian cleared his throat. "She's right, Draven. The wolves need to see their queen standing with them. Need to know she believes in victory enough to risk her life for it." Draven's jaw clenched, but he nodded curtly. "Fine, but you stay in the center of our formation, protected by the marked wolves and my personal guard. Non-negotiable," agreed Aurelia said, fastening the last buckle on her crimson armor. By midday, Ravenhold Fortress was organized, chaos weapons, distributed positions, assigned strategies reviewed for the final time. Aurelia spent the hours before battle, moving among the wolves, offering words of encouragement and spreading her healing magic to anyone bearing old injuries. The marked wolves stayed close, forming a protective circle around her wherever she went. Aurelia could feel them now, their determination, their fear, their absolute commitment to protecting her. When the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the scouts returned with final reports. Prince Valor's army was massive, 30,000 soldiers, just as predicted. They'd brought siege engines and cavalry, ballista, and enough supplies to outlast a long siege. "We meet them in the valley," Draven announced to the assembled alphas. "Open field combat where our speed and strength matter more than numbers." "That's suicide, one," Alpha protested. "In the open, they'll surround us." "Let them try," Cassian said grimly. "They're expecting poison and paralytic to work. They don't know about the marked wolves. Don't know. Our queen can heal faster than they can injure. By the time they realize their weapons are useless, we'll have already torn through their front lines." Aurelia listened, her hand unconsciously moving to the mark on her neck. She felt Draven's steady confidence despite his inner fears. He was putting on a show of certainty for the troops, but inside, he was terrified. "We're not dying today," she said to him firmly. "I won't allow it. That's not how war works, little wolf." "Then let's change how war works." As darkness fell, the wolves of Obsidian Vale assembled in the valley below the citadel, 3,000 strong, a fraction of Valor's forces, but every one of them a trained fighter who'd chosen to stand against impossible odds. Aurelia stood at the center of the formation, her marked wolves surrounding her in a protective circle. Draven had wanted her further back, but she'd refused. The wolves needed to see her, needed to know she was with them. Then, like a tide of metal and malice, Valor's army appeared over the ridge. They marched in perfect formation, banners snapping in the wind, the setting sun glinting off thousands of weapons and armor. At their head rode Prince Valor himself, resplendent, in golden plate armor, a crown already sitting on his head despite his father still living. "Wolves of the Northern Territories," Valor's voice, magically amplified, rolled across the valley. "You stand at the edge of extinction. Your kind has plagued humanity for too long, and today that ends. Surrender now. Give us your so-called queen, and I'll let the rest of you flee north with your lives. Never." The roar came from 3,000 throats simultaneously, a sound that shook the valley floor. Valor's smile was cruel. "So be it. Ready arms." The army behind him shifted, crossbows raising spears, lowering cavalry beginning their charge. "This is it," Draven said quietly, his voice carrying to every wolf present. "Remember your training, protect your packmates, and trust in your queen." His eyes found Aurelia's across the distance. "I love you. I love you too," Aurelia whispered, knowing he'd hear it. "Now let's show them what we're made of." Valor's arm fell, and 30,000 soldiers surged forward with a deafening roar. And the Golden Queen of Obsidian Vale let her power blaze forth like the sun itself, turning the battlefield into a crucible where the fate of two peoples would be decided in blood and magic and fire. The battle for the Northern Territories had begun. The first volley of arrows darkened the sky, thousands of projectiles arcing toward the wolf lines. Aurelia felt the marked wolves brace themselves, ready to channel her healing the moment the shafts struck home. But Draven had planned for this. "Shields!" he roared, and the front lines raised massive barriers made of reinforced wood and steel. The arrows struck with devastating force, but most shattered harmlessly against the defenses. Those that found their mark, poison, tipped paralytic, laced, sank into wolf flesh. And immediately Aurelia's power blazed to life. She schnelled healing into the 5 marked wolves, feeling the poison spreading, feeling the paralytic trying to take hold. But her magic moved faster, racing through the connections like wildfire, burning away toxins before they could do lasting damage. The wounded wolves staggered, then straightened, roared their defiance, charged forward instead of collapsing. Impossible. She heard someone scream from Valor's lines. "They should be down." "Why aren't they down?" "Because they have me," Aurelia whispered, her hands glowing with golden light as she schnelled healing through 5 conduits simultaneously. The armies collided with earth-shaking force. Wolves in their beast forms tore into human lines faster and stronger than any normal creature. But Valor's soldiers were well-trained and well-armed, and for every soldier who fell, 2 more stepped up to take their place. Aurelia watched in horror as the sheer numbers began to tell. The wolves were better fighters individually, but they were drowning in enemies. Even with her healing, they couldn't hold against 30,000. "We need to break their formation," Cassian shouted, appearing at her side, covered in blood. "If we can scatter them, our speed advantage becomes decisive." "How?" Aurelia demanded, already channeling healing toward a cluster of wounded wolves to her left. "The prince. If we take him down, his army might break." Cassian pointed toward the center of Valor's forces, where the golden armored prince directed his troops from horseback, but he's surrounded by his personal guard. Getting to him would require. Aurelia felt Draven's determination crystallize through their bond, and her blood ran cold as she realized what he intended. "No," she whispered. "Draven, don't." But he was already moving. She watched as Draven's massive wolf form blazed with power. Not just his own, but magic he was pulling from their bond. He was using her power to enhance himself, making himself faster, stronger, more dangerous than any living creature had a right to be. He tore through Valor's lines like a force of nature, heading straight for the prince. "Cover the king!" Cassian roared, and wolves surged forward to protect Draven's flanks. But Valor's guards were rallying, forming a wall of steel and shields around their prince. Draven crashed into them with devastating force. Aurelia felt every wound he took, a sword across his flank, a spear through his shoulder, dozens of cuts from blades designed to bleed him out, and she poured healing into him as fast as she could, keeping him on his feet through sheer willpower. But the marked wolves were flagging. She could feel them struggling under the weight of channeling so much power. "My queen!" Cassia gasped beside her. "I don't know how much longer." "Hold on," Aurelia commanded. "Just a little longer. He's almost there." Draven reached Valor's inner circle, his jaws closing around the throat of the last guard before the prince himself. Valor's horse reared in terror, and for a moment victory seemed within reach. Then Valor drew a sword that blazed with unnatural fire, and Aurelia screamed as he drove it through Draven's chest. She felt everything. The burning agony of the enchanted blade, the shock as it pierced his heart, the darkness beginning to close in. "No!" Aurelia's scream shook the battlefield. Power exploded from her in a wave that sent friend and foe alike stumbling backward. She didn't think, didn't plan, just reached for Draven with everything she had. And she pulled. Not just healing. She ripped Draven's consciousness from the brink of death and held it, refusing to let him go. Poured her life force directly into him, burning through her own reserves to keep his heart beating. The marked wolves cried out in pain as the strain became unbearable. But Aurelia couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. She'd rather burn out completely than lose him. "Stay with me," she snarled. "You don't get to die." "Not today. Not ever." Draven's wolf form convulsed, the sword still lodged in his chest, but his heart kept beating, kept dash, dash. The enchanted blade exploded in a shower of golden sparks as Aurelia's magic overwhelmed its power and destroyed it from within. Draven staggered but stayed standing, the wound already beginning to close around the shattered blade. Valor's face went white with terror. "What are you?" "I'm his mate," Aurelia said, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "I'm his queen, and you just made a fatal mistake." She released the full force of her power. Every wolf on the battlefield, whether they bore her mark or not, suddenly blazed with golden light. Wounds healed in seconds. Exhaustion burned away. And into each of them, Aurelia poured her absolute conviction that they would win. The wolves attacked with renewed fury, no longer just fighting for survival, but for victory. And Valor's soldiers, seeing their prince's sword shattered and their enemies suddenly invulnerable, began to break. "Hold the line," Valor screamed. "They're just animals. Hold the dash dash." Draven's jaws closed around Valor's arm, yanking him from his horse. The prince hit the ground hard, his crown rolling away into the mud. "Don't kill him," Aurelia's voice rang out. "We need him alive." Draven shifted back to human form, one hand pressed to his still healing chest, the other at Valor's throat. "Give me one reason why. Because if you kill him now, his generals will just continue the war in his name." Aurelia approached her marked wolves, flanking her despite their exhaustion. She looked down at Valor with contempt. But if he survives to tell the tale of his defeat, if he goes back to the human kingdoms broken and humiliated, they'll think twice before attacking us again. "You can't let me live," Valor spat blood. "I'll raise another army. Come back with 100,000 soldiers. You'll do nothing," Aurelia said coldly. She knelt beside him and placed one glowing hand on his forehead. "Because I'm going to make sure you remember exactly what happened here today. Remember what it feels like to be helpless, to be at someone's mercy." She pushed the memories into his mind. Every moment of the battle, every wolf who'd fallen because of his ambition, every face of the soldiers who died following his orders. When she pulled her hand back, Valor was sobbing. "Now get out of my kingdom," Draven said quietly. "Take your soldiers and go. And if you ever threaten my people again, I won't stop my mate from letting you die screaming." Valor scrambled to his feet and ran, his personal guards following. And slowly, like a tide retreating, the human army withdrew. They left behind their siege engines, their supplies, their wounded. All of it abandoned in their haste to flee from the wolves who couldn't be killed. As silence finally fell over the valley, Aurelia collapsed. The strain of healing an entire army simultaneously had pushed her far beyond her limits. She felt Draven catch her before darkness claimed her consciousness. "I've got you," he murmured. "You did it, Ceres. You saved us all." "We did it," she whispered. "Together." Then she knew nothing more. 8 years later, Aurelia woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of laughter from the gardens below. She stretched luxuriously, noting the empty space beside her in the massive bed. Kel must have already started his day. She rose and moved to the window, looking out over what Ravenhold Fortress had become. The fortress was still there, but now it was surrounded by a thriving city. Wolf and human homes side by side, markets bustling with trade between the species, children of both kinds playing together in the streets. So much had changed in 8 years after the Battle of Crimson Valley, as it had come to be called. The other human kingdoms had quickly sued for peace. Valor had been deposed by his own nobles, deemed unfit to rule after his catastrophic defeat. His younger sister, Princess Ara, had taken the throne instead and immediately sent envoys seeking friendship rather than war. It had been slow work building trust between species that had feared and hated each other for centuries. But Aurelia and Draven had done it one treaty at a time, one alliance at a time. Now Obsidian Vale was the jewel of the North, a kingdom where wolves and humans lived in harmony, protected by the Golden Queen, whose healing magic had ended the war before it could destroy them all. "Mama, Mama, look what I can do!" Aurelia's attention snapped to the garden, where a small girl with dark hair and silver eyes was showing off for her younger brother. As Aurelia watched, the girl shifted seamlessly into a small wolf pup, her silver fur gleaming in the morning light. "That's wonderful, Aaliyah," Aurelia called down, "but remember to shift back before breakfast. You know the cook hates when you track mud through the kitchen." Aaliyah shifted back to human form, giggling. At 9 years old, she was already showing signs of inheriting both her parents' power. Draven's strength and Aurelia's healing magic merged into something entirely new. Her little brother, 5-year-old Cedric, named after Aurelia's grandfather, who'd lived just long enough to meet his great-granddaughter before passing peacefully in his sleep, was still learning to shift. But he had his father's eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. "They're getting stronger every day." Draven's voice came from the doorway. Aurelia turned to find her husband watching her with open adoration. Even after 8 years, the sight of him still made her breath catch. He'd aged well. A few silver threads in his dark hair, laugh lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, but he was still the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Come here," she said, and he crossed the room to pull her into his arms. "I've been thinking," Draven murmured against her hair, "maybe it's time we took a vacation. Just the two of us leave the kingdom in Cassian's capable hands for a few weeks and remember what it's like to be just Draven and Cerys instead of the Winter King and the Golden Queen. That sounds perfect. Aurelia rose on her toes to kiss him. Where would we go anywhere? Everywhere. As long as I'm with you, I don't care. They stood together watching their children play in the garden of the kingdom they'd built together. A kingdom where wolves no longer lived in fear, where healing was valued over violence, where love had conquered hate. Do you ever regret it? Draven asked softly. Agreeing to marry me that morning, giving up the life you knew. Never. Aurelia turned in his arms to face him fully. That morning I thought my life was ending, but it wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Mine too. Draven pressed a kiss to the mark on her neck. His mark. The one that had started everything. I love you, Cerys Thornage. More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow. I love you. Too, Aurelia whispered. Now and always until the mountains crumble and the stars burn out. They stood together as morning light filled their chambers. Two halves of a whole that was stronger than either could be alone. The Winter King and the Golden Queen who'd found each other in darkness and built something beautiful in the light. And in the garden below, their children laughed and played. Growing up in a world where the sins of the past had been healed by their parents' love, a world worth fighting for.